You said that you love this fraternity. We are a democracy. You better think over what you're going to do. Because if you do what you just said, you're not going to be a member here anymore.
They mean it, Carl. I know. Even the ones that voted with you. Well, once that vote is taken, you've got to abide by it. Even me. I'm gonna go out and get some fresh air.
This is Talk Back. Our drama for this program is called Big Man on Campus. Our guest is the president of Boston University, Dr. Harold Case. Later, Mr. Merle Emery and Dr. Ross Snyder will be asking Dr. Case questions raised by our play.
I have here, gentlemen, brothers, and pledges, I have here the salvation of this fraternity. Gather round all ye mighty and gaze upon my works. Watch your big clumsy hands. You want to tear this?
Come on, Scott, break it up. Cut out the clown. What have you got?
What have I got, Brother President? Merely the most precious document since the signing of the Magna Carta. Merely the emancipation of all you slaves to study. Gentlemen, I can't help everyone. Those who have trouble with English, history, math, are out of luck. But for that poor, suffering, forlorn minority who find the study of the physical world just too much, I have here a complete copy of the end-term examination in elementary required physics.
Hey, man, he's not kidding. Look at this.
Hey, what a princess this is for me.
Get out the mimeograph machine and let's get this around. Hey, what are you doing?
Give yourself a chance.
Chance for what?
Think a minute.
What do you want me to think about?
You can pass this exam without having the questions in advance.
Sure, but that's a lot more trouble. Hey, watch it. Will you call? You're going to rip it.
Grove. It's cheating.
Come on. Every physics student in the house has got a copy of it.
That doesn't make it any less cheating, does it?
What do you want me to do about it?
You don't have to do it, do you?
I don't have to, but I'm going to. Now, don't get holier than thou with me, boy. And look, you better get on it yourself, because if everyone's got a copy of this, well, there's going to be some pretty high grades. You better protect your own standing.
I'm not going to have anything to do with it.
Okay. Just don't look across at me for an answer when you're looking into an empty exam book. Boy, this one is a chiller.
Yeah.
Hey! Oh, you're sick, boy. Really sick.
Nobody's going to use him. I'm going to round him up and tear him up.
You talk about tearing up, huh? You're the one that's going to get torn up.
Not right to have him. It's even worse to use him.
Look, this is a war between us and the faculty. We got out an intelligence force that's got us the enemy's secret information, and we're going to use it.
Oh, let's stop kidding around. We get carried away, okay? Now we're going to stop, and we're going to think. and we're going to tear them up.
Look, a lot of guys have these in their mind already. How are you going to tear that up?
Are you going to help me or not?
Oh, boy, you're on your own. I couldn't be more opposite you if one of us was standing on his head.
Don't tell me you have the English Lit exam, too. That would be too much to ask.
I call a general meeting.
What have you got in mind, Carl?
I have the right to raise any question that concerns this fraternity. I'm acting on that right.
Okay, Carl, but it better be important. This is exam week, and we don't have time to throw around. All right, nobody is required to stay, but the meeting is called to order. Sit down and listen to our brother. We lend you our ears.
Okay. My father was a member of this fraternity before I was.
Yeah.
If I hadn't been pledged here, I would have remained an independent before I would have gone into any other fraternity. I just want to be clear that I love this house as much as anybody in this room. And I'm proud to be a member and a brother of every one of you. But I think we did something pretty crummy this afternoon.
Okay, hold it down. Let him finish.
And I think we ought to clean it up. I'm talking about circulating those copies of the physics exam. I think it's beneath us. This fraternity has higher standards than that. So, I propose we tear up all the copies of the exam and ask the faculty to make up a new one, because what we still have in our heads and can't tear up.
Hey, Carl, are you kidding?
No, I'm not kidding at all. I put this as a serious proposal. I want to put it to a vote.
Hey, you really mean that.
A motion was put before us by a brother in good standing. He asks for our deliberation, and he's going to have it. The debate...
I have to speak against the motion. I brought those questions in here in good faith. I'm not going to tell you how I got them, but it wasn't easy, I can tell you that. And I did it because this fraternity has always stood way high in its grades. For 5 years now, we've had the top averages on this campus. And I want to keep it that way, and that's why I brought in those physics questions. One more thing. That's a required course. There aren't two of us that are really interested in it. They force it down our throats, and I say we have a right to fight back.
Mr. President,
Brother Grover?
brothers and gentlemen, about a half an hour ago, old Carl here, whom I happen to be afflicted with as a roommate, and whom I call my buddy out of the goodness of my personality, he did take my copy of the exam and tear it up. And then he tore up his own. I admit, at first I was sore. Then I thought about it. And he's right. If it gets out, and it probably could, it could mean a scandal that would ruin us. It would take years to build back our reputation. I vote for the resolution.
Okay, hold it down. Brother Wallace?
Now, wait. Let's talk about this for a minute. Now, wouldn't we be in just as much trouble if we admitted we had copies of the exam already? And wouldn't we just about have to admit that in order to get a new exam?
Hey, Jim. If there is anyone else who wishes to be heard, let him speak now or be still forever. All right, the debate is closed. I ask for a vote by a show of hands. All those in favor of tearing up those exam questions, raise their hands. All right, those opposed? The vote is 13 to 12 against the resolution. We keep the exam questions and use them. I hereby adjourn this meeting.
Wait a minute. All I can say is I'm ashamed. You guys have no principles.
Come on, Carl, it was a democratic vote.
And maybe it was democratic, maybe it wasn't.
You had your say and we listened. And then we voted the way we thought we ought to.
Look, I don't care how democratic it was. I'm just saying don't bother wasting your time studying those questions because I'm going to say I have a copy of the exam and they better make a new one.
Carl, there was a vote.
Look, I can't help it. I'm not going to be a partner to cheating. I'm not going to let the house hurt itself.
You're the one that's hurting us.
I'm taking all the responsibility. Nobody else is going to be involved.
You're setting yourself up against everybody. Either you believe in democracy or you
Oh,
don't.
look, I don't want to go into it. I'm just saying don't bother studying those exam questions.
You said that you love this fraternity. We are a democracy. You better think over what you're going to do. Because if you do what you just said, you're not going to be a member here anymore.
They mean it, Carl.
I know.
Even the ones that voted with you. Well, once that vote is taken, you've got to abide by it. Even me.
I'm going to go out and get some fresh air. Quiet out here, isn't it? You know, this is the nicest house on the row. I mean, not because it's ours. I mean, because it really is.
You're going to throw it all away. Just like that. For what?
A guy has to do what he believes is right. I sat in there and listened for 2 hours, hoping somebody would say something that would move me. Something I could take into my mind and use as an out so I wouldn't have to do this. Nothing anybody said could change my mind. Grove, I can't be a cheat.
But you have to live with people, too. Suppose they cheat. You don't have to use those questions.
Grove, you know what? You know what bothers me? They're only hurting themselves. See, our civilization is getting more and more complicated. That's why physics is required now. Sooner or later, we're going to need it. They're going to kick themselves for what they're doing in there.
But you're trapped. If you try to save them, you have to cut yourself off from them. Now, you may be right, but you're going to be alone. Why don't you sleep on it? Maybe it'll look different in the morning.
By morning, I might have talked myself out of doing something I know is right. Walk me to the dean's house?
The dean's? No, I can't. I wish I had your guts, Carl. I even know that you're right. But I can't cut myself off from everybody. I tell you, if you go down there, if I have to choose between the fraternity and you, it's got to be the fraternity. Hey, good luck.
Now, you've lived with a certain amount of courage during your life. How does it feel to be in this kind of a spot, anyway?
It's a very difficult spot, and one comes to it only with reluctance and only because he feels that finally he can't live with himself and take any other road.
President Case, we noticed several places where these boys mentioned it's war, we have a right to fight back. We have done this in a democratic manner. Is this a rather sort of an excuse or a device that the young people today are using to keep them taking a stand?
Well, Mr. Emery, everywhere in society we excuse what we do that we know isn't quite right by giving an illustration of something that was done that we know that is wrong. And to say because some other group in some situation did something we don't approve, therefore we are excused for doing the same kind of thing in our own lives, is the way to excuse ourselves from all responsibility.
And so you sort of think that the rest of these fellows were hiding in the crowd, but this young fellow at least had the guts to stand up and be counted somewhat visibly.
Well, you see, one member said, this fraternity has had high standing, and I want it to continue to be that way. This was a device, a method, and we call it expediency. If he could make this method work, he could keep his fraternity high in grades. And against this you have the question of whether or not this course of action is right or wrong. And the young man who was standing up against him in the story was saying this is wrong, and therefore neither the individual or the group should be guilty of.
What I particularly enjoyed in him was that he was willing to stand up and make a judgment. So often I find myself not willing to make judgments that there is better and worse, and to stand up and be counted for something. And I have a feeling that other people are like myself. We would rather not make a judgment, but just go along, going along.
Well, there's a general tendency for us to assume that a majority vote is the right thing, and this is an error. It is essential for the group to be informed about the course that's right or the course that's wrong or the course that's the best. And in this case, the young man is trying to inform his group, even if the group fails to see the issue and votes as it did, 13 to 12. The young man has the right to say, having tried to inform you and knowing the vote, I accept the risk and the consequences and elect to take my own course of action.
Well, now this is really rough, isn't it? Because a man in the business who would take a particular viewpoint might find himself fired from the business. A person living in a community who takes a viewpoint against that community opinion might find himself ostracized and have to leave that community, as we know people have. And this young man is undoubtedly going to be, if he stays here, going to be ostracized, and he'll have to leave the college, I suspect.
Well, leaving the college is a question.
Yes.
But his conflict with the fraternity is certain. And it should be said, I think, that no one takes advanced positions and stands for them to the end, until the decision is made, without a willingness to accept the consequences. This is true for Martin Luther in the days of the Reformation. It's true for Martin Luther King in the days we now confront in the life of our own nation. And the group is organized to support the individual, but the individual is the final entity in the group. It is really formed to make it possible for him to become a real person.
Well, gentlemen, I'm still interested in the 13 that voted against this.
Yeah.
What is there about our American culture today that gives these boys this kind of thinking?
We have several levels of ethics. And at one level, membership in a group proposes loyalty to that group, right or wrong. And the 13 were saying at least two things. One, we'd like to pass the examination with a high grade, and this is the way to do it, and we write off our moral convictions. And two, we'd like to have our fraternity lead the campus in grades. Now, at these 2 points, you have a secondary ethic. It isn't pitched at the level of what is right, but what will work best.
Well, don't you think they really were just chicken? Fundamentally, they believed what this fellow believed, but they didn't have the courage that it took to come down?
I think you can't always accuse the person who decides on a lesser level of being chicken. Sometimes he thinks that to accomplish this result will be better than to risk the result that will be achieved if the other course is taken. But as to his loyalty, I think he gives a lesser loyalty instead of a greater one. But I wouldn't accuse him always of being a coward.
No, but he might well be.
Oh, of course.
Is there a difference between pure stubbornness and the strength and willingness to take a stand for your convictions?
Well, both are found in every group decision. One person simply refuses to have any new light cast on. He has made up his mind. He doesn't want to have unfriendly people or people of a different nationality or religious or racial group living in his neighborhood, and so he has a stubborn position. Another person says, I take this not on the ground of being stubborn, but on the ground that I believe, all things considered, it's the best thing we can do at the present time. They're two quite different courses. And above this, there is the level of the person who says, but I have a deep religious conviction and a move to do the thing I think to be right, regardless of the consequences.
Well, just to be skeptical for a bit, why not just put it on the plain, simple fact that when a fellow keeps surrendering what he knows is the right thing in order to be accepted by his group, he's becoming increasingly sick. And these 13 that my friend here is concerned about are on the road to sickness because they have surrendered themselves, and in order to be accepted by the frat, they are going along doing things that are violating their conscience.
I wouldn't use the word sick, I think, because they may be very healthy-minded.
I think you're getting awfully cautious with us here. Go ahead.
They may be part of society. They may relate to other people. But they may have come to the conclusion that this is the way democracy behaves.
Well, that's true, but as my friend Dr. Maurer at the University of Illinois has pointed out, he believes that today people are suffering from repressing their conscience and not from repressing their biological impulses. And also Rollo May has pointed out that the sickness of American people today is that they feel they have to deny their own feelings and thoughts in order to be accepted by a group. Now, isn't this the problem of these people?
Well, this is one part of the problem. They are trying to find a way to stay in the group regardless of their real convictions.
Yeah.
But remember that all life grows constantly, whether you're talking about a simple-celled animal or a human being, so that the decisions the member of the group would make today may be different from the decisions he would make tomorrow. So he operates back and forth between his animal impulses and his humane concerns. And the purpose of this leadership on the part of the young man in our story is to help them to move from mere protection of their own impulses to loyalty to the thing that he believes is the very best.
I was partly thinking for the moment that perhaps the therapists of our time are clearer about the dangers here than perhaps the people of the church.
Yes, it is true that a person or an organization is in danger when it behaves on low levels. This, I think, has relation to something more than morals or other than morals. I think it's a part of a generation that wants ease and not difficulty. It wants to ride to work, not to walk. And therefore, anything that causes hard effort, stern self-discipline, is forgotten. And this is the real critical danger in our life today, when in one part of the world you have aggressive and disciplined people facing free people who are undisciplined. Our story illustrates this great worldwide problem.
Do you think it's possible that a part of this sickness, I like that word, a part of this sickness could be caused by the church not doing its job, yielding to outside pressures?
Well, we must remember that the church is made up of persons who are wholly dedicated to its ideals, people who are only partially dedicated, people who lived in it a long time, and people who just joined. Therefore, you have an organization with an ultimate goal or dream, trying to reach that with people who do not wholly understand it. Historically, the church has conceded and compromised again and again, and it is presently in danger in a world in which compromise is becoming increasingly evident unless it stands for certain positions because they're true and regardless of the consequence.
But I'm beginning to wonder now if perhaps knowing what is right for us is not really our problem, but it's finding the courage to stand for our convictions.
Well, and the courage comes out, almost always comes out of a religious dedication. When finally one risks himself, his reputation, his standing in his fraternity, his citizenship. He does this because he has a great overtowering sense of belonging to God, more than he belongs to his church or even to his state. And I think we should say that the person, the individual, is the purpose of all social organization, that the organization is never properly the goal. And when it becomes the goal, it loses its faith and the individual becomes lost in the process.
President Case, before concluding, how do we find out whether our convictions are worth standing for?
Well, I think we can never have a guarantee in advance that the conviction we support is exactly the right one. We take our position on the ground of our faith. We have an honest and intelligent faith and believe this is right, and we test it in action to see whether our faith proves out. We test it by its probable results. We know some of the things that have happened when a similar course has been taken. We ask whether it will stand publicity, and what has happened when other people have taken a similar position in other areas. All these and other questions must be asked, but we don't have advance guarantees. We have to work them out in the experiences of life.
I think I'd like to put a last question to you in this sort. Do you find in churches and colleges and universities people really trying to find out what convictions to live by, and that this search for integrity and for becoming the kind of a fellow that we saw in this story is really going on today? Is there some promise?
Well, Dr. Snyder, I think crisis always produces its own leaders and its own solutions. There are great promises today. I think we have the most serious-minded group of college students we've had in a half a generation. I think we have more concern in churches to try to find the answer in difficult days. Youth groups in church and synagogue and in all kinds of organizations are really discussing critical problems and taking stands. Laymen everywhere are urging that the church give leadership moral guidance, state the principle, and allow them to make decisions. We have the largest church membership we've ever had in the history of the country. And I think we ought to recognize that we now have more tools, more skills, more knowledge, more convictions, really, for solving our problems than ever before. And if we don't solve them, it is not because there's some bad force in nature, but because we didn't live up to the best that we know.
This discussion isn't finished until you have thought through to your satisfaction the questions that our guest Dr. Case, Mr. Emery, and Dr. Snyder have been considering. It is important to you, to your church, and to your community that you know where you stand on the questions and issues that Talk Back is raising. Talk Back is a public service program presented by this station and the churches of your community. It was produced in cooperation with the National Council of Churches as a contribution of the television ministry of the Methodist Church.